There are a bunch of websites you can go to that have 3D models available to download that you can print or modify. We're going to take a look at Thingiverse, which is one of the most popular and biggest sites. I'm going to search for dog, and let's take a look at what comes up here. So Thingiverse's search is a little weird. You need to be really literal here. Like I couldn't misspell dog, or if I put too many things, I might not get what I'm looking for. And even when I did just say dog, the first thing that comes up is a skull. So yeah, you got to do a little bit of looking here. I'm going to scroll down and see what came up. And let's take a look at this low poly golden retriever. That term low poly just means that the details have been kind of boxed off like this in the style of like an old video game. This is great because it makes it a little easier to print and it still looks interesting. It doesn't just look flat. So the first thing I look for when I get to a thing page is if the artist has taken the time to put a photo of an actual 3D print. And in this case, they have. There's two photos here of the actual object printed. I can see some artifacts from the printing and the layer lines here. So I know this is legit. The artist probably designed this with 3D printing in mind. The next thing I look at is the geometry of the model. So let's go back to this first picture. So I'm looking for some of the rules of 3D printing. The first one is overhangs. You don't want an overhang that's more than 45 degrees. So if this is 45 degrees from the bed, that will print. Anything up here is going to print great. Anything down here is going to have a problem. You might still be able to get away with something in like the 60-degree range, but anything more than that, you're definitely going to want to turn on supports, and the quality of your print is going to suffer the sharper those overhangs are. So in this case, the dog has a almost 90-degree overhang here on the snout. So I know that this model is going to require some support material in order to print successfully. You could try it without, you might get lucky, but you know, when you follow these rules, you tend to get better results on the first try. So we know there's going to be some support involved, but it looks fairly minimal. There's not a lot of overhang. The next thing I look for, are there any like super fine pointy details that may end up being less than 2 millimeters? In this case, no. Unless I printed this dog really, really small, the legs are sturdy enough. There's not really any like hairs or fine points or horns or anything to really be too concerned with. The next thing I look for is how much of the print is actually on the print bed and how much of the volume of the print is over that surface. So in this case, there's a good amount of dog that's actually sitting directly on the print bed. And the front paws, even though the legs are fairly thin, there's big paws here kind of holding it down. So I don't see any reason why this wouldn't print successfully. The next thing I look for is how many people have made this on Thingiverse. So 74 folks have printed this out, said it looked great, and were happy enough with the model that they wanted to share their print. I can click through and look at the makes, and I can look for some of the challenges that maybe people have had, or I can see like from these all look great. So I'm feeling really confident now. The next thing I look at is back on thing details. Did the artist say anything about printing this? So in this case, they mentioned here that, you know, it does need some support. And they talked a little bit about the kind of filament that they used, and also posted a video about the design that includes post-processing tips. So I feel very confident that this artist took the time to think about how this is printed. The last thing I want to look at is thing files. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I'm looking for .stl, which is the standard 3D printing format, stands for stereolithography, or a newer one called .3mf works really well right out of the box, and you don't have to do a lot of work. If you only have something like .obj or some other weird file formats, you have to start thinking about how much work do you want to put in to get this to be able to print, and was it really designed for 3D printing? Once my design has hit all of those marks, I can go ahead and say download. I like to download the STL from the Thing Files tab instead of using this download all files button. The download all files gives you a zip with a bunch of extra stuff that you don't need, including all these pictures. So it's much easier to just hit this and get your STL. You do need to take a look at the license and think about how you're using this project. You don't want to go ahead and like make money off it if the artist hasn't said that it's available for that. And make sure you give them credit where credit is due. Let's take a look at a model that I would not print. So this sitting dog here, similar model, But it's got some details on it that make me a little about printing it. So the first thing is it also has that overhang. So there we go. We need some support. But now the support might be hitting this part of the print. It's not on the bed. The legs look a little thinner and they come down to smaller points here. Even though there's this little platform on the bottom, the dog's not really sitting all the way on it. So when I turn on supports for that snout, I'm also going to get support all in here that I might not really be able to get out because it's going to be really tight. And that's just going to look messy. I just don't, not crazy about it. The other thing I don't like about this model are the ears, because if you notice, they come down to a point, and this point is lower than the rest of the body here, and it's kind of just floating on its own. So when the printer gets to this layer, even with support turned on, you're going to get this little tiny thing that's trying to print and hold up, and that's a really good place where you're going to get just a spaghetti mess. Like, it's going to fail, it's going to detach from the support, and you're just going to have filament everywhere. So just from looking at that, I know this is not a good choice to print. Doesn't mean you couldn't print it, just means you might have to do more work to get it to come out good. The other thing is there's no photograph. So the artist has not taken the time to actually print this thing. And if I go to thing details, there's really nothing in the summary here. There's only 5 makes. I might be able to go through and see that people are printing this fine, and maybe I'll want to give it a try, but you know, I'm not even going to get to that point. And then the last thing is under thing files, we only have a .obj, which tells me the artist has not printed this at all. So I'm just going to avoid this one altogether. Something that's kind of in between is something like this balloon dog here. It's a well-made model and you could print it, but look at how much support it needed to print and look at how messy it got. I would stay away from this one too, and maybe look for a balloon dog model that's cut up into pieces or maybe cut down the middle so you could print it in halves and glue it together. But you know, you could do this one. It's a good example of an in-between model.